Hi, good morning, and welcome to the ZP webinar on FoodSense. So we like to do this webinar once a week, and it's really just answering questions that have come in during that week. So what I'm going to do now is jump straight into it. I just want to make sure that I'm getting the volume across. But anyway, let me jump forward and say it's the 3rd of January 2024, and this is the FoodSense webinar. And as I say, we do like to do this webinar once a week just to really answer technical questions that have come in during the week. That said, what FoodSense is really about is digitization and traceability in the supply chain. But it's also, I suppose I should broaden that and say it's really about also rapid testing and low cost testing as well. And I'll kind of emphasize that a little bit more as well. But this digitization and traceability in the supply chain means something that if somebody is in the USA and on the west coast of the USA and they're doing some testing, or they're in Turkey, if they need to trace that data back, they can do it. And I'll sort of demonstrate that today as well because of the cloud connectivity. If you see me clicking around a little bit, I just want to make sure that everything is basically coming through okay just on the YouTube channel. All right, so let me jump forward a bit more and just say today we're going to be measuring, and we're talking about rather measuring green chilies and chili powders. So question number 1 would be about green chilies, question number 2 will be about chili powders. Just to say, we do have a monthly webinar on this. So on the 25th of January, we do 2 webinars, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. That's my morning and my afternoon. And that way then we end up covering most of the globe, because if you're in the morning, you can come to, if you're in Europe, the morning one will work for you. Also, the afternoon one will work for you. But if you're in Asia, the morning one works for you. And if you're in the Americas, then the afternoon one will work for you, for example. Anyway, I'll go forward a little bit more and say today's questions are, somebody has green chilies. Can we test them and how do they prepare them? The quick answer is yes, you can test them and you can prepare them. There's quite a nice scientific paper out there as well. And I'll remember to put the link to that scientific paper underneath this webinar as well. Question number 2, somebody is a recent user of the FoodSense technology. We're a bit unfortunate that they've received this over the holiday period, so we've yet to give them online training because, I mean, today is the sort of 3rd of January, so people are still sort of coming back to work, though some of us have been, supporting over the holiday period. But anyway, question number 1 is about green chilies, and question number 2 is really about red peppers. Just to say that anyone who's a user of FoodSense Generation 4, either for measuring green chilies or red peppers or ginger, for example, everyone gets personalized online training. We do weekly webinars. This is a really good format for us staying on top of what's going on in the field. And then we also have monthly webinars as well. So don't forget the 25th of January monthly webinar as well. FoodSense Gen 4 is really a kind of small handheld device. As the name says, it's actually the 4th generation of this piece of technology. It is easier to use. It is more accurate, and that accuracy in part comes from this cloud enableness. Basically, the data goes to the cloud. It's your data, but if you choose to share it with us, then we can definitely support you. It does do multiple analytes, chili, ginger, and total antioxidative status are the analytes that we currently have. The hardware is elegant. The whole system is pretty elegant, the way that all the technology goes to the market, and it's easy to go from different assays just by using these QR codes. Most people end up only actually testing, let's say, chili or ginger. There's not so many people going between the two of them, but the nice thing about this instrument is if you go between the two of them, it's fine. You just use the QR code to go between the two. It's on the Play Store, so if you've got an Android phone, you can get the Sense All app from the Play Store, and if you've got an iPhone, you can get the app from the Apple App Store. And I've put a double R in there, so I'll have to correct that later on. And as they say, for each assay, there's actually a QR code to go with it once you open up the app, that is. So we do all these kind of videos and demonstrations of us testing chili and ginger. And it's probably worth saying that we do have an awful lot of electrochemical sensors. So if there's things that you would like to test that are not currently on the test, it's probably worth just letting us know so that we can think about adding them to the menu. I think the problem that we're trying to solve is there's really only 2 ways of objectively measuring capsaicin in either green chilies or chili powders. You've got HPLC, and you've got FoodSense. Now, the HPLC is expensive either to own or to test. The expense means that people are doing under testing. What I mean by under testing is that whether it's a green chili or a chili powder, these are very heterogeneous samples. That means that the capsaicin is not evenly distributed throughout them. You have to do several tests you have to take several samples and do a test on each sample in order to understand the range of hotness or capsaicin or Scoville heat unit across that sample. So because it's expensive, actually people are not doing that. Slow results. Slow results could mean, results in days, if not weeks. Basically, you sort of package up the result, probably send it to the lab, and eventually get the result back. And there's no sense of error with this. People are getting these absolute numbers, 50,000 Scoville heat units, 1.5 million Scoville heat units, but there's no sense of error on that. But with the FoodSense, it's much lower cost. Lots of testing is possible. For example, I was having a correspondence yesterday with a current user. Overnight, he's done another 19 tests. There's no way you do 19 HPLC tests in essentially less than 24 hours. I was only speaking to him 10 p.m. my time. It's now 7:45 a.m. So this is less than 12 hours later. He's done all those tests. It's a transparent process. What I mean by that is the fact that you will get the Scoville heat unit on your phone at that time, but you'll also get the raw data in the cloud, so we can actually really confirm what's going on with that result. Whereas you have no transparency on HPLC, it's just a result. You have no vision. So the HPLC I describe as a bit of a black box that you kind of send a sample off to the lab. They'll do an extraction on it. They may do a dilution on it. They may then inject it onto this HPLC column, and it gives out a chromatogram. A chromatogram is really just as the molecule comes out of the machine, it goes through a detector, and they get this kind of, the word is elution, as it elutes out, they get this absorption, because the molecule is absorbing the light, because they have what's called a UV detector. It doesn't really matter, but they have a chromatogram, and then they put that chromatogram against a calibration curve. And this is the thing, that I don't think when that machine was last calibrated, how good the calibration was. So there's a sort of mathematical transformation from the raw signal to the to Scoville heat units, but you have no vision on any of that process or any of that mathematics. So I think if you put like an error on each particular step here, you can end up with errors that are actually something like 25%. But when you actually look at the certificates of analysis or the test reports back from labs, they give you no sense of, let's say, error on these things. So just as a side note, if you take the same sample and send it to 3 different labs, you'll get 3 different results. So it's not only expensive, but actually between labs, you will definitely get different results. And the other part I would say is, if you took the same sample and sent it to the same lab on 1 month, sent the same sample with a different name to the same lab on a 2nd month, and you sent the same sample with a different name on a 3rd month to the same lab, you are going to end up with 3 different results. So it's expensive. Between labs, you'll get different results, and even within labs, you'll get different results. So I think it's kind of expensive, and doesn't have the accuracy that people want. Part of this is actually because I'm talking about HPLC really as a machine, but there are methods that people are running. So there's the ASTA 21.3, the AAC 99.5.03, and then this FSSAI 24.0. I bring up the FSSA. This is really AI 24.0. This is really only useful to people in India. But I just want to say, if you look at the AOAC method, a lot of what happens is people are using it to test chili powders, but it's actually not applicable to chili powders. So there are sources of error intrinsically with doing a lot. When you do a lot of manual steps on an HPLC, you do build up error. But there's also a source of error that the methods that are being run, and I've seen this happen for chili powders, for example, the methods that are being used are not validated for those chili powders. So that happens quite a lot. And so and that's the same for these for this FSAI. It's kind of interesting because there's a real contradiction in this, because it says a method for testing chili powders, and as soon as you read the first paragraph, it says not applicable to chili powders. So it almost says a method for chili powders, second paragraph or first paragraph, not applicable to chili powder. So there's a real kind of confusion there, and I'll try and remember to to put the links underneath the video anyway. Just a quick background on this. I know we've got 2 questions to answer today. One of the questions is testing chili powder. Testing green chilies, which I will get to, and also testing chili powders. This is a technology that we've licensed from the University of Oxford. The only reason I bring up, I put ginger oil there, I should put capsaicin. The only reason I bring up this is, I know when it's capsaicin what we're looking for. We're looking for a very distinct shape in the raw signal. Again, you don't have to worry about that raw signal, but due to traceability and transparency, actually that raw signal is always saved. Every time you do a test, the raw signal is always saved. So if you're ever concerned or you're ever challenged, you not just show a number and say, oh, you know, the machine says it. No, actually, we can look at the raw signal, and you'll see us looking at raw signal today. I don't expect you to look at raw signal, but it does mean that ZP can support people. So, example, you know, here we're in the lab. You take your sensor. By the way, only use the sensor once. This is, I think, relevant really to question number 2 today. I'm a bit concerned that they might be reusing sensors, but you take the sensor, you have your meter, you have your app, which you can either get from the Google Play Store or the Android App Store. Now, when you run that, when you put the sensor in the meter, and the app runs the when the app runs the meter, the data goes back to the app, and the app sends the data up to the cloud, and you will get either Scoville heat units or ppm, depending on whether you're measuring chili or ginger. Different sensors for those, by the way. So you get sort of speed and certainty because you actually did it. Now, what's interesting, I think, is that the raw signal is in the cloud, and if you choose to share it, which this person in question number 2 today has actually shared it, then I can actually see the raw signal and actually start being able to kind of comment upon it and make sure that everything's working okay. So that's a kind of nice thing about the workflow, that you get an immediate result, but also we are able to get the raw signal if you're willing to share your data with us. It also has it also connects into LIMS systems as well. LIMS are laboratory information management systems. We have an API built in, so it actually clicks into LIMS. So question number 1 is really about can we test green chilies? It's probably worth saying that there's a paper here, and I'll put a link underneath the video from Charlie Rower at, I don't know why I put Purdue here, but it was at the University of Minnesota that he did this work. And what he did is he took 16 varieties of chilies, including some green ones, Anaheim, jalapeno, serrano, and his Hungarian hot wax. I suppose you could describe that as green orange, but anyway, he took apparently 4 green chilies and he tested them. Just to say about chilies, they have to be homogenized in order to get an accurate result out of a chili. So what I mean by that is, if you look at a chili, you've got the upper flesh, the ovary, the seeds, and the bottom flesh. I've got 4 varieties here, and what you find is that most of the heat is actually in the ovaries. I know that anyone in the industry understands that the heat is not in the seeds, but anecdotally, people in sort of, let's say, the consumer world think that the heat is in the seeds. It's not. It's in the ovaries. And then in order, it's kind of in the bottom flesh, and then in order, it might then be in the upper flesh, and then in order, lastly, it's in the seeds. So I bring that up because you can see that a chili fruit is got a distribution of capsaicin in it. So for our device, you've really got to homogenize that chili in order to get an accurate determination of the average Scoville heat unit throughout that particular chili. And just out of interest, a chili is about 88%, 90% water. So if you dry it, you end up increasing the capsaicin content by about 10x because you've driven away all the water, you've concentrated it all down into a much smaller volume, and therefore the density of the molecule goes up, and therefore the apparent hotness goes up. And that is true. I mean, if you have a sort of measured fresh chili pepper, you can calculate the theoretical dry, and then you can measure the actual dry, and then you find out actually this is actually quite a good correlation. So just an FYI, if you're measuring chilies, you've got to homogenize them. And just out of interest, dried chilies are about 10x hotter than than fresh chilies, and it's just because you've driven out all the water content. I'm going to get back to the question itself. But this is a point, see here, that in fact, if you don't homogenize a sample and you try to then sample from it, you can miss the capsaicin because the capsaicin is basically located in certain locations. If you have a chili powder, it's more homogeneous, but it's still heterogeneous. So if you sample, you can end up capturing capsaicin sometimes, and then other times you can miss the capsaicin. So I think this is happening a lot at HPLC, that people are taking one sample, sending it to the HPLC, and thinking that that one sample and that one test is representative of the entire batch. And it's not. You've got to actually take multiple samples in order to understand the overall range of hotness in a particular chili product. When you get to something that's like a sauce and it's very much more homogenized, and it's easier to essentially test. It doesn't matter kind of essentially where you test from. So we do find this, that if you're testing a chili, it's a very heterogeneous sample. So you really have to blend it up in order to then be able to accurately determine the Scoville heat unit. If it's a chili powder, you just have to take multiple tests across that powder to understand its overall hotness. It's easier with things like, especially very pureed things like a Tabasco sauce, which is, is extremely sort of chopped up and very blended, so that you end up with a capsaicin quite evenly distributed. So this is highly heterogeneous, homogeneous, and then chili powders are somewhere in between the two of them. Just back to the original paper by Charlie Rowe, and getting back to that green chili. Can we test green chilies? The quick answer is yes. How did he do it? Well, he took 10 grams of chili peppers. And I've really got to think through is 10 grams even, is that representative of, let's say you've got half a ton of chili pepper. You can understand that 10 grams is not super representative of it. But this is what he did. He took 10 grams of chili pepper. He mixed it with 100 milliliters of ethanol. And he tested it once on HPLC. And he tested it once because it was too expensive to do any more times. But actually he tested it in triplicate on the FoodSense. And I spoke to him personally. He said, no, he was really pleased actually with the FoodSense because it was quick, lower cost, and he could get many results done. So he understood that it was inadequate to test just once. So 1 test and 3 tests on the FoodSense was in his paper. What he's doing is he's taking, as he said, 10 grams of the chili peppers, pureeing it essentially with 100 milliliters of ethanol in his case. Then he's taking 1 volume now of this puree, and he's adding 9 volumes of the chili buffer. So he's essentially doing, first of all, he's doing 10 grams into 100 mils of ethanol. Ethanol. He's blending all of that. Then he's taking a volume of it and mixing 1 volume of this kind of puree now with 9 volumes of buffer, and then he tests that. Now the software on the FoodSense actually takes account of that last dilution. So he says to the machine, oh, I did a 1 in 10 dilution. So when the machine gives him his Scoville heat units, it's taken account, it's telling him this is what's in the puree. But of course he's already done essentially a pre-dilution, because he already took 10 grams and put it in 100 milliliters of ethanol. So I did a quick calculation and said, well, in order to get back to the original chili, let's say, you just divide that number by 0.91 and you'll get back to the original value. So he took 10 grams, he put in 100 milliliters of ethanol, he blended it all up, so he's now got a puree. He took 1 volume of that puree, diluted it with 9 volumes of the buffer, and tested it, and he got a result. That result is what was in the puree, because the software takes account that he did a 1 in 10 dilution. But he's already done a dilution before that step. So to get back to the original chili, just divide your result by 0.91. Just a bit of a discussion. Chilies are heterogeneous samples. Sauces are homogeneous samples. If you're dealing with heterogeneous samples, you can find that by testing different samples, you can end up with a spread of results. And it's not because the test has got errors, it's because actually the sample is heterogeneous. Whereas when you homogenize something, you can test several times and you can get I call it a relative standard deviation. The errors or the range is shrinking down. And when you test something that's very homogeneous, it's easier to sample, because it doesn't matter where you sample from, everything is the same, and you get essentially less spread in the data. So if you've got a variable sample, you have to test it, and it could be either chili powder or green chilies. You've got to test multiple times to really understand the range of hotness across that product. Nobody does it because essentially to run 5 HPLC samples, I mean, in the US or Europe, if you don't have a contract with the test house, it could be something like €100 per test. So nobody does this. They just do one test, and they try to minimize the test because they know it's going to be expensive. But actually, that means that they get a result that's based on one sample tested once. Whereas actually now that people are able to actually test, the sample in several places and end up getting a range of results. So the problem with HPLC is expensive. It leads to what's called under testing. The results are slow. You have to send them off to the lab, get them back, maybe some days later, maybe a week later. There's black box, no sense of error, where of course we're lower cost, lots of testing. And lots of testing. Questioner number 2 is done 19 tests in less than 12 hours. Fast results, transparent process. And transparent process is important. You'll see that again in question 2 in a minute. That I'm able to see what's happening in this guy's facility because he's sharing the data with me online. So sampling reproducibility, that you actually, what this person's ended up doing is they're trying to test a chili powder. So they've sampled it 5 times, understanding that the more times they sample, then the better they understand the in total Scoville heat unit of that sample. What they did is they took something like 0.1 grams of the chili powder and put it in something like 9.9 milliliters of the buffer, and they vortexed it, and they actually left it standing overnight in order to do that. So they ended up actually getting results on their phone there and then. And so it's good to get the results there and then on their phone. So they, because now they got the results and they're happy. But what's nice then is that actually they were able to share the data with me, and I was able to look at their data. The only reason I bring this up is because I know what we're looking for in terms of the data. These peaks are not just by error. They're not just random peaks, let's say. This is distinctive of capsaicin. So when I look at this one, it's distinctive of capsaicin. Different samples, but they're all giving the same shape. Distinctive of capsaicin. So we know what we're looking for, let's say, in the raw data to make sure that everything is actually working okay. This is why I sort of say it's a transparent system and it's not some sort of black box. Now what you find out is that in sample 1 here, he got 55,000 Scoville heat units, which you think, oh, okay, well that's okay. But actually sample 4, he got 91,000. You go, oh my goodness, this is terrible. It's like, no, it's not the test that's the thing. It's the sample, because actually then he's got, he's tested it 5 times. He's got 78, 73, 82. If you do an average of all that, or a mean of it, he's got 76,000 Scoville heat units. His standard deviation is 13,000 Scoville heat units. His coefficient of variation is 18%, which is not too bad for really is a raw sample. But when you look at a certificate of analysis or a results certificate from a lab, they run in the AOAC method, so I know what method they're running, let's say, and they get a result of 11,636. No sense of error, let's say. And there is always an error when you're doing any kind of measurement, but with ZP's technology, there's a definite transparency in the results. So I'm going to come off now measuring green chilies, but if I was to summarize green chilies, that Charlie Rower paper, University of Minnesota, he took 1 gram of chili, blended it with 10 milliliters. No, sorry, he took 10 grams of chilies, blended it with 100 milliliters of ethanol, blended all that up, and then he took 1 volume of that new puree, this kind of alcoholic puree, and he added 9 volumes of buffer. Then he tested that, and he got a result. And when he tested it, because he told the software, I did a 1 in 10 dilution, it's telling him the result for the puree. Because he had already done a 10 grams into 100 mils of buffer, you just need to divide that result that you get off the FoodSense by 0.91, and you'll actually understand what was in the original chili. It's also quite nice as well, because I realized I put a few slides up there that we have a kind of a sense of how much capsaicin is actually in chilies, because we've done that kind of work in the past. Measuring chili powders. So we do have people measuring chili powders. I showed this image earlier on. But what you'll notice, I just said it as well, that they're testing 0.1 grams in 9.9 mils. So they're essentially doing a 1 in 100 dilution. And they've got a vortexer here. This is important because they're basically shaking it up really rapidly to sort of make sure that everything kind of dissolves. Now what they're doing is they leave it standing over 12 hours. That's just because they want to make sure that they get the most accurate result that they can get. So eventually, I suppose they're doing it in the afternoon, leaving it the next morning, and then testing. The reason they're doing this is because capsaicin is a molecule that is hard to dissolve. So if you ever read the HPLC results or HPLC methodologies, you find that they're actually essentially refluxing it or boiling it in alcohol for 5 hours. So capsaicin is slow to dissolve. So by waiting 12 hours, they're basically making sure that they've got it all dissolved before they actually do the test. That's why they do that. You'll also notice, and this will be pertinent today, that depending on the hotness of your product, we might tell you to do different dissolutions. With those chili peppers, it's quite interesting actually, because Charlie has already taught us how to test a chili pepper. 10 grams into 100 milliliters of ethanol, blend it all up, then just take 1 volume, put it in 9 volumes, that's a 1 in 10 dilution. So Charlie's kind of taught us how to do that already. But if it's mild, we'll tell you to do a 1 in 10 dilution, and if it's hot, we'll tell you to do a 1 in 100, and if it's much hotter, 1 in 1000, and if it's much hotter, 1 in 10,000. I don't want to go into 1 in 10,000 today, it's pretty rare that we do that. But we call it the 500 rule. And the reason being is capsaicin is intrinsically not terribly soluble in materials, actually. It's only the fats and oils that allow you to actually dissolve it up into into sauces and stuff. It's the fats and oils that actually allow that to do it. So we've got this 500 rule that says, you know, if you think you're 5,000, we'll tell you to do a 1 in 10 dilution, because that will bring you to 500 Scoville heat units. If we think you're 50,000, we'll tell you to do a 1 in 100 dilution, because that will bring you to 500 Scoville units. So I'm always just playing this 500 rule, because I know that capsaicin has a limited solubility. And if it's much higher, then we might end up telling you to do 1 in 10,000. But what's also nice is that if you are a user of FoodSense Generation 4, we are able to support you essentially in real time. So what I mean by that is now we've built up this pipeline between ourselves and a particular client that I'm supporting at the moment. I'm able to see his data appearing in real time now, which is really quite great. So the reason we tell you to kind of do these dilutions is we know that capsaicin has a limited concentration or limited solubility. So we're trying to overcome that. Because we know what we're looking for in terms of, signal. This is what the signal should look like. We know what the signal strength should look like. You don't have to look at those signals. Those signals are converted to Scoville heat units. But traceability and transparency, those signals are saved. They're saved up on the cloud. And if you decide to share them with us, we can look at the signals as well. So the power of FoodSense Gen 4 is the fact that every time you do a test, it gets saved. And if we can always pull up the raw signal. And if you decide to share it with us, so it's a choice, then we can also look at it and make sure that everything's working okay. So we're used to looking at people's data. This is some chili powder data. Here, I think I advised the guy that he was doing 1 in 1000 dilution. It was just too much dilution. You could see that the signal was hardly nice. Let's say it was a little bump here. So that was, so we were able to troubleshoot that pretty quickly by just looking at the data. Now I've got a particular client at the moment. So this particular client, essentially, I think received this somewhere between Christmas Day and New Year's Day. I think approximately that. They've installed the app. They've tested it. The first thing it says is dilution's too low, and I should have picked that up actually, because what it's saying dilution's too low is I can see it in their data. They're basically diluting too low, and you'll see that in the data in a minute. But now they've shared it with me, so I can see the data now. So now he shared the data with me. I know what I'm looking for, so I can then look at what I have a sense of what I want to see, and I can have a sense of what he's actually showing me. So if you're a FoodSense Generation 4 customer, we can actually help. Everyone gets personalized online training. We're trying to sort it out for this guy. It's a bit of a holiday period at the moment, so it's a little bit trickier because I think even today it's only the 3rd of December. So many people in Europe are only kind of, unfortunately, trickling back to work at the moment. But we do these weekly webinars, so I will address the data. And we also have monthly webinars as well. So if you're thinking about becoming a FoodSense Gen 4 customer, come to the monthly webinar. So I'm looking at his data, and I can see like these really strange flat lines and flat lines here. So I have a suspicion what's going on here, because I know what I'm looking for, but I'm not seeing it. I'm just seeing these flat lines. But I can actually see the instruments working correctly. I can see that, You know, I know I've got a line along the bottom here, and I've got the same line along the bottom here. I've got a range here, I've got a range here. First thing you'll notice is that he has massive numbers compared to other people's numbers. So that's okay. And then, so he's done 4 tests when he originally got it, and they're all showing the same kind of shape. But it's nice because he doesn't have to, send the data to me. He's set up the sharing. We're actually able to share it. So the first thing I noticed, or he's told me, is that he's doing a 1 in 10 dilution. So the first thing I suggested was 1 in 100 dilution, which he did have some questions. Can I just redissolve this solution I've already made? Yes, you could do that. We've addressed that. But he has to tell the app now that I'm at 1 in 100. I'm just reading, somebody's just asked a question. This is really great. What is the adaptability on industrial levels where tests are performed in quality for continuous bulk operations? Continuous bulk operations, see, because the thing about FoodSense is, I'm just addressing a question online, sorry. The thing about bulk continuous operations is you have to take a test, you have material moving down or through production. You have to be able to take that material, you have to blend it up pretty quickly, you have to take now that sample and you have to test it. One thing I would say is, if you watch our videos, the test time is easily these days less than 2 minutes. So your biggest let's say delay is take 10 grams off the continuous production, put it into 100 mils of ethanol, blend it. So, you know, if I was to make a guess at that operation, if you get good at it, that's a 5-minute operation, and then the test is less than 2 minutes. So once you get good at it, I would suggest that you can do a test in less than 7 minutes. I'm about to show you that this guy has done 19 tests in less than 12 hours. So let me just, you know, so it shows that the test is intrinsically fast. It's just the sampling that's the thing. The other thing that he did, he did share a image with me, and I was a bit worried about the image because the reason being is, this is the chili sensor, okay? It's 7 millimeters wide, 25 millimeters long, okay? I only want the sample on this end. I only want the sample here. I'm a bit worried that I actually can see some wetness down here. See this? I mean, you can see the chili down here, and I can even see it down here. If you get wetness on essentially, I'm going to put my mouse on it here, on this end here, this is where we make electrical contact. I do not want any solution down this end. If you put any solution down this end, you're essentially creating a short. You know, this is electrochemistry. We're passing current. Don't give me an electrical short by putting liquid down here. I can see, you know, bits of chili down here. So only put 50 microliters up here, because I can see it's, you know, there's chili everywhere. So I'm a bit worried that some of your high results is because essentially liquid's got down here and you're shorting the sensor. The instrument's still fine, by the way. I can see your results, but just FYI. Make sure that liquid doesn't get down the results. Now, the person online is asking really about throughput. So this data that I'm showing you here, I was talking to this guy at 10 p.m. my time last night. Then he was going back to his facility and he was going to do some testing. I wake up this morning and I can see that actually he's done another 19 tests. So now this morning it's only 8 a.m. So essentially within less than 10 hours, this guy has done 19 tests. It gives you a sense of the throughput. And now the nice thing is, because he's sharing it with me, I'm actually able to see now that his results, I was showing you his results later on, they were just crazy high lines. He's now doing, I think, a 1 in 100 dilution, and I can see the results are starting to make sense. This is his test 5, and I can see that, you know, it's looking good. You know, the software's picked up the peak, you know, so I know that, you know, that's starting to work. Now, when I look at his test 16 and 17, I think this is his test 7 and test 16. I can still see that test 7 is looking good, but test 16 is crazy high again, crazy high. So I got a suspicion that, well, let me give some advice, because the nice thing about FoodSense is it's low cost to test. It is rapid to test. You can do it yourself. It's extremely transparent, and we can see the results. So if people are challenging you on it, basically, I'm sorry, but I can see the results. I get this quite a lot. Oh, my HPLC says this. Yeah, but what evidence do you have that the result you got from that lab is accurate? Oh, no, you don't have evidence. So I do have evidence here. So I can see the capsaicin. I can see your capsaicin now, especially in that test 5. You were on about the 1st of January doing a 1 in 10 dilution. Now you're doing on the 3rd of January 1 in 100. Things are looking better now. Still very high signals, which could be, are you reusing the sensors? Don't reuse the sensors. Capsaicin is an organic molecule. It sticks to surfaces. If you reuse a sensor, the capsaicin just keeps on building up all the time and the results just go higher and higher. So use a sensor, dispose of a sensor. You can't wash them, you can't reuse them. This is the organic nature of capsaicin. Only test 50 microliters as a sample. I'm a bit worried that you're actually, over time, you're wetting this sensor and the liquid is getting up into the electrical connections. I've never seen it before, but when I look at that picture, I suspicion that might be what's happening. The other reason that you're getting very high signals is your material is very hot. So I might ask you to do 1 in 1,000 testing, but I'm a bit worried that you are reusing the sensors or that you're actually wetting the electrical connection. So make sure you're not doing that. So you could do a few tests by doing 1 in 1,000. So you had a sample, you did a 1 in 10 dilution, massive signals. You then did a 1 in 100 dilution. Actually, some of those signals will start to look good, but still quite high. You can take that 1 in 100 and actually do a 1 in 1,000 now. Yeah, just do my maths. Take one volume of the 1 in 100 and divide it by... yeah, well, I appreciate that. The person was just saying he thinks this is a good alternative. So take your 1 in 100 sample and dilute it to 1 in 1,000 by just taking one volume and putting it with 9 volumes, and that'll take you to 1 in 1,000. And now I say do less testing, okay? Let's get you trained. I know it's, you want to get going, but let's do less testing because you're just unlucky that today is the 3rd of January. People start coming back from holiday soon. Let's get you trained, because I don't want you to spend lots of time doing tests. I think it's actually important now to do the training. Rather than doing a lot more testing, give me the notes. You've done 24 tests. So I think the first 4 tests you did on the 1st of January, you were doing 1 in 10 dilution. Okay, that was huge. Now you're doing 1 in 100 dilution. But I'm a bit worried because the first test on that day, I call it test 5, it looked good. But then it started going high again. So I'm a bit worried. Why are you going high again? And I'm worried that it's wetting or you're reusing sensors. So make sure you're not doing that. You can do 3 tests at 1 in 1,000. Let's just have a quick look at that. But give me notes. Tell me what's going on, because it's the meta data or the notes that will help me understand your raw data. But I can see your raw data. I suspect you are hot and you will need to do 1 in 1,000. But we need to take care of number 4 first of all, which is do less testing. Just send me the notes. That would be really useful. But this is your data. That is capsaicin. So we can see it. The instrument's working. We just got to figure out now, the intricacies of your use of the instrument and also the dilution of the instrument as well. So today is the 3rd of January. We do these webinars, live demos every month. There's one on the 25th of January. So if I was to summarize the comments today. Okay, so there were 2 questions. One was on green chilies. The other one was on chili powders. Question number 1, simple question. Can you use it on green chilies? Yes, you can. It's been done by the University of Minnesota. Charlie Rower, he did it. He came up with a methodology which said take 10 grams of the green chilies, blend it with 100 milliliters of the ethanol. He's essentially generated a puree. Then he took 1 volume of the puree and put it with 9 volumes of our buffer. He put it on the machine and told the machine will ask him what his dilution was. He said 1 in 10. He gets the result. The result he's got is for the puree. Because it's simple to do the calculation that he took 10 grams originally and put it in 100 mils of ethanol, you take that result off the machine and divide by 0.91. And that will give you what the original green pepper's hotness actually was. And if you get stuck, you can see that I'm helping this guy here. No issues. all the data is in the cloud, so we can actually solve it. And I know what I'm looking for. I'm looking for these nice, beautiful curves, and we can have a look at, and that's the transparency that you have with this system that you don't have necessarily with HPLC. Now with the chili powder guy, first 4 tests you did were 1 in 10, super high signal. I'm a bit worried that you're wetting the connections. Then you do a 1 in 100. Now I'm starting to see data that looks better. I think you still need to go to 1 in 1000, but I need the notes because then I can guide you more. So now I have your raw signal. I got confidence that the machine is working, but I need your notes because you may be changing the chili powders and doing all sorts of stuff. So I need your notes. The thing about a scientist, I am a scientist, is we can be quite methodical. So give me your notes before you go and do too much more work. And don't forget, everyone, there is a webinar on the 25th of January, and you're all welcome to that. And I'll put a link underneath. So if you're a FoodSense Generation 4 customer, everyone gets personal online training, weekly webinars, and monthly webinars as well. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. And I thank you for the questions that have come online today. It is appreciated that when people engage with us like this. Otherwise, have a good day and speak to some of you and see some of you in our webinars as well. Okay, thanks very much.